My name is Serge Schoenmaker. I'm an architect. I have a small architectural company in Amsterdam. The company exists of 6 architects. And we work on very different kind of projects. So residential projects, commercial projects, heritage projects like this. We follow the design phase, but also the tender phase and the execution phase, so that at the end we can deliver the projects with the detailing and the sensitivity that we want to achieve. I studied architecture in the 90s in Delft at the university, and at that time the conceptual architecture in Holland was really flourishing, and I think it was also internationally really famous. They called this the Super Dutch generation. Although I was studying in that time, I felt more attracted to an architecture which plays more with the senses, where it's more about the quality of the space and the light and the materials and the use of color. So after my study I moved to Switzerland, where I worked for almost 8 years. And there I think I learned to work with architecture in a different way, where it's really about the experience and where it's really about the use and the treatment of materials. I worked a long time for the office of Peter Zumthor, and I also worked on the heritage projects. And I think when you work with a heritage project, these kind of methods are getting more and more important. Fort Hoofddorp is one of the a bit more than 40 forts of the defense line of Amsterdam. And the defense line of Amsterdam is a ring of forts built around the Dutch capital around 1900. And this fort is from 1904. And they were all connected with dikes, so it was a defense line made to defend the capital. And the idea was that when the enemy would attack, that the areas around the forts will be flooded with water. And the armies that would attack would get stuck in the water. It was 2008. A good friend of mine, Femma Hammer, she is a theater producer. She contacted me and she said, yeah, there is this abandoned fort island in the middle of Hoofddorp and it's not accessible for public. And together with her, I paid a visit to this fort and I was really surprised by the spatial qualities of the fort and the sculptural qualities of the spaces. The building is built pure functional. It was designed for purely functional use. But yeah, the way we perceived it was totally different. There was a lot of aesthetical quality in the building. But at that time there was no client, so I'm an architect. I'm not used to develop projects my own, but I saw this opportunity and gradually we changed into the role of a project developer, because as there was no client, we also had to arrange the money, the permits, and to get all the permissions to develop this. And this whole process of getting the approval from the authorities, finding the finance, that whole process, and at the end also the renovation took a decade. So at the end, the role of architect in this project was much broader. It was much broader than just being an architect. We were also the people who developed it, and at the end now taking care of the maintenance. First time Fem and I visited the fort, it looked completely different from now. The paint was coming from the walls. There were a lot of dust and dirt, and the green was growing over the roof, and there were a lot of leakages. So it was really in a terrible state, and also in a lot of parts there was no electricity and was not insulated. But besides the fact that it was in such a poor condition, I think we saw the potential of the building, and we really fell in love with this construction. And what was really important for me is that the characteristic atmosphere of the fort, that we didn't ruin this. What you see a lot with heritage projects is that they renovated it too much and that it gets a more modernistic feeling. And what was for me really important is that this atmospheric feeling that you have when you walk through this old fort, that this stays, but that at the same time it is suitable for modern use. It's really important that you really feel what is the quality of the space, that what is so special about the material that is used, and that also the additions that you create, they fit in a very modest and nice way. In the beginning we said we want to change the Fort Island into an open-air theatre. And then a lot of people in the area protested against these plans because they were also afraid that it would be too loud and too crowded. While talking to all these people here, we thought maybe we should more turn it into a park. So what we did on the outside in the landscape is that we made this routing from the bus stop on the other side of the landscape towards the entrance of the island, and then visitors can come up with the path that we created, that we added to the landscape, to the highest point of the fort. Next to this path we changed the two outside spaces, which are on top of the island, into an open-air theatre and a wild garden. We created a route to the fort with the most important spaces, and we said that this will be the public route. It will always be possible for visitors to walk along that route and to visit these spaces. And the other spaces, which were more like standard, we rented them out to the different companies. We looked for a program which is both commercial, to also maintain the fort, but also a cultural program. I think what is really important for such a project is that you also have cultural activities, that you get schools to this fort who can learn from the history. So at the moment we have different kind of activities that we organize next to the companies who just have their business in the fort. What is really nice is that what we achieved with this transformation is that we gave this land back to the inhabitants of Hoofddorp. Yeah, so this specific fort is located in the Haarlemmermeer, and it's one of the few forts which has two levels. And from the 40 forts, there are just two with 2 stories, and one of them is this one. This fort had to host 200 soldiers, but there was not enough ground to make a wider fort, so that's why they used 2 levels. And it makes this fort also quite specific. So, of course, like all the forts, it's made of solid concrete. You see a lot of hardwood and steel in the details. But this fort in particular is very special because of the topography. So the water around the fort is quite low, and the highest point, the observation post, is quite high in the landscape. The original lighting came from the wall niches that you see now in the walls. So in these wall niches they placed oil lamps. This gave this very atmospheric appearance. So I didn't want to turn it into something very bright, but keep the atmospheric character of the spaces that are already there. In this project, it's not only the artificial lights which is really important, but also the daylight and how the daylight comes into the building. I think from the beginning that's something that really attracts my attention because of this very specific openings of the fort and the relatively small openings. At some places the light comes in a very specific way and very directed. And because of this daylight, you see the textures of the materials in a very beautiful way. At some places you have openings, and in some places of the fort you don't have openings. There is a big contrast between dark spaces and light spaces. Here we choose fixtures which suit to the pure appearance of the architecture. So we didn't want it to attract too much attention to the fixtures itself, but the most important thing was the light that they produced. When you walk around, the light attracts your attention and not the fixtures itself. One of the things that I really like of this building is also the quality of the historical details. And so what is a really beautiful detail, for instance, are the steel handrails which are placed into the concrete, so they're flush with the concrete. so that the rifles didn't get stuck when the soldiers would run outside. Yeah, the craftsmanship of this detail is really beautiful. One other detail which is really nice, which you see a lot in this fort, are the wooden pieces that are placed into the concrete. So they were poured on site into the concrete as a kind of prefabricated system. The goal of this construction was that the soldiers could hang their cabinets and the beds to the concrete without screwing into the concrete. It's very functional, but aesthetically it's also really nice. What we wanted to achieve with the design is that you don't perceive it just as a historical building, but you can enjoy the combination of historical details and modern additions. So on one hand, you can really recognize what is historical and what is new. The new additions are designed in a very clean and minimalistic way. But at the same time, we wanted the experience to be one, so that the historic and the modern elements can be experienced as one entity.